Hey everyone, RogueGold here, welcome back to The Division 2. Today we are trying out a bit of a new idea here on the channel. Now this is a concept that I've seen done by other creators for looter shooters and other games like this over the years. It's always looked pretty entertaining. The basic gist is that you take the community's hot takes and controversial opinions, and then I would give my thoughts and reactions to them. And so I thought, hey, what is the Division community if not perpetually in a state of heated exchanges and disagreement? I jest, of course, but yeah, I thought this would be a fun idea, and I hope you all like it. So a few weeks ago I put out a call for submissions for this over on YouTube, Twitter, and Discord, and I was blown away by nearly 400 responses, so a huge thank you to everybody who partook in that. Hopefully that is an indicator that this is a video idea that a lot of people were interested in. Unfortunately, I of course will not be able to get to all of those submissions within this one video. Of course, if y'all do enjoy this and you want to see more installations of it in the future, let me know that. But yeah, I went through the list and I picked out some that I think would be a good fit for this video, but we're just going to go down the list, take a look at each one, and I will give my thoughts and reactions to it. I will timestamp each individual topic down in the description in case you want to skip around to any of them. And by the time you get through hearing my thoughts on all of this, I would love for you all to keep the discussion going down to the comment section, but with the emphasis being on respect, right? The goal of this is not to spark a bunch of argument and vitriol. We're just discussing and giving our different viewpoints on these topics that can be controversial, so let's at least try and keep things civil when we're talking about it. But I think that's everything I've got. Without further ado, let's go. Alright, now we begin with a submission by DJ Tickle over on Twitter, great friend of the channel and fellow content creator here. He said, as Div 3 is so far away, capping expertise and raising the level cap to 50 would be a good idea. And then he added, everyone will hate this, but all RPG MMO games do it, it's real progression. So definitely a very interesting proposition here. I think the Division 2 is a special case because two things can be true at once. Is the Division 2 within a genre that historically does do, we'll say, annual level cap increases? Yes. But also, has it done annual level cap increases for the past 5 years? No. And I think you say it right there in the comment, if the Division 2 were to go ahead in today's day and age and do a level 50 increase, a lot of the active player base would very much hate that. That's not to say I would, right? If I were in charge of the Division 2 and I were making the game just to satisfy players like myself, then yeah, I would love to see level cap increases to, like you said, bring back some of that real progression, have more regular reasons to continue grinding the game, but I think ultimately you would see a very similar reaction to what we saw with seasonal characters this past summer, where trying to do that kind of thing now just isn't what the community wants or is ready for or any of that. This has of course been a hot discussion because a lot of people have speculated that the upcoming Brooklyn DLC is going to introduce a level cap increase. I've stated in all of my past videos on that I do not think that will be the case, reasons being because, like I said, I don't think a lot of the player base would be into that, but also they made the entire focus of a title update last year with Year 6 Season 1 and 1 Endgame. They specifically went in and removed the two endgames between level 30 and level 40, so if they were to then the next year just come back in and make level 40 and level 50, that wouldn't make a ton of sense. I think they know that they need to keep everybody at one place, and so I don't think Brooklyn is going to bring level 50, or that we will see that in the remainder of the Division 2's life. Do I think this should be the goal when they start out the Division 3 and when they continue that after its launch? Absolutely. I would love for us to transition to a model where every year we get a new expansion with a new mini campaign, a level increase, all of that, similar to how Destiny or World of Warcraft does things. That would be fantastic in my opinion, but that is something that you need to do at the start of a game's life, not 5 years in when people haven't been accustomed to that, when they've been collecting so much stuff, and when you have systems like expertise in the game, which again, just to do a level increase and make all of that stuff invalid, that would not go over well. And so it's largely why I keep arguing that for the remainder of the Division 2's life, right, because we have a finite amount of time left in this game before the Division 3 gets here, I really hope and wish that they would focus on more experiential content, stuff like new incursions, you know, more DLCs, even though it's taken them so long to get this one out. I don't know if that's a good idea, but stuff that will actually excite players and want them to check it out and see all of it, but it doesn't invalidate what has already come before and all the progression that's happened up until now. So yeah, but great ideas there, Tickle. Moving on, we got J. Cox over from Twitter, who said, hot take, 5 years in, the field caches after every level up is freaking annoying. I spend 90% of the 5 XP event breaking down junk. I wanted to include this because I absolutely agree. Field proficiency caches have become the bane of my existence. And just like he said, with how common those 3 times and 5 times XP events are becoming nowadays, part of me, as somebody who is well over shade level 1000, almost wishes that I could disable it simply because I don't want to deal with all of the caches that I'm getting in my inventory. An amazing quality of life change that I would love to see in the future is the option to actively not get caches when you rank up, whether that is simply disabling them, or maybe you have the alternative to get a bundle of resources every time you level up. That would be fantastic, but I am absolutely tired of getting so many caches, especially when those XP events are active, perspective, so I 100% agree with you there. Alright, next up we've got another great friend of the channel here and fellow content creator The Gaming Brigade, Sergeant Graybeard over on Twitter. He said, "I never play PvP, as you know. However, when a game has a strong and healthy PvP community, the entire player base benefits, make that a priority, and more endgame content like the first game." Alright, so let's focus on the PvP part of this first before that last bit. Second to survival, which we'll talk about later, PvP related comments was one of the most common submissions that I saw for this, and so I thought that Sarge's comment here was pretty unique among some of the rest, because often what you'll either see is people who enjoy PvP saying that it has been neglected and they really want to see more support towards it, compared to people who don't play it who say it is the worst part of the Division franchise and that Ubisoft and Massive should drop it moving forward. So as somebody who really enjoys PvP myself, I mean that continues to be the primary thing that keeps me invested in the Division franchise. I have loved, PvP in the Dark Zone from the Division 1 up until now. Now that expertise and shade levels are out of conflict, I've been playing that a lot more this past year, really enjoy that. Is it perfect? In no way, shape, or form, but that doesn't mean I don't enjoy it, and a lot of people do too. And so I appreciate how Sarge mentions that he thinks that even though he doesn't play PvP, he can recognize the value of having a well-supported PvP community, and I largely agree. Now my thing that I think differs from maybe some other people is that I'm not out here pretending that PvP is like equivalent to the PvE side of the Division fanbase. Obviously there are far more PvE inclined players in the Division games compared to PvP. I don't think it is as quite of an extreme of a gap as some people would lead you to believe, and I think what you have to keep in mind, just the same as PvE, is that the amount of people playing right now is not the total potential amount of people that would play if the Division 2 or a Division experience in the future had well supported and, fully fleshed out content for PvP. But I do fully believe that PvP is unique in the sense that it provides basically infinitely replayable content, because although you are ultimately going to eventually be playing on the same maps and modes that you've done dozens and dozens of times before, every single fight that you have is going to be unique in some way or the other, right? You can never make an NPC that is as diverse or as different in playstyle and thought process as another real human player. So all of that is to say, I really agree with Sarge here. I would love to see a bit more PvP support in the future. Again, I'm not asking for it to be equal to the amount of PvE stuff that we get in the game, because that is the majority of the player base. And really in the grand scheme, I don't think you need to do that much to really satisfy the PvP audience, at least a little bit. If we're talking in the context of the Division 2 specifically, in my view, all you would really need to do to give them at least some level of satisfaction after all these years of basically no new content is spend a portion of one title update's resources revamping the playlist part of the conflict mode, right? It was clear that Red Storm originally had intentions to do like a competitive playlist and limited time modes, because if you go to the conflict breakdown, you have to select quick play every time you go in. If they were able to separate things out to a quick play playlist, a competitive or at least more hardcore one where, I don't know, respawns are a bit more limited or they do something to just give you that bit of an extra edge, and then a third playlist where they do some kind of limited time modes where maybe they do 2v2s as an experiment, they do other stuff like that. If we had that infrastructure and then we were just to get 1 or 2 new conflict maps per year, that's really all I think it would take to satisfy a lot of the existing PvP players in this game. Is that going to happen? Probably not. But one could hope for the Division 3 that they might give a little bit more time a day to PvP. We'll see what happens. And then as far as the last part of Sarge's comment talking about make more in-game content like the first game, partially I do think this falls into the rose-tinted glasses look at the Division 1 that I think a lot of people have. Obviously I love the Division 1, but was Underground, for example, really that revolutionary of a mode? I don't know. I think there's a lot of nostalgia that plays into that. I kind of like it when they try new ideas and take new swings to see if other stuff in the endgame would work. Does that mean everything in the Division 2 has been perfect? No, not at all. But I'm more inclined to continue to prefer seeing new ideas tried rather than just bringing back exact copies of what we played years ago. Alright, moving on to Tawanto over on Twitter. We have another PvP related comment. They said the PvP aspect from Div 1 and 2 always seemed like a hot balancing mess. The one aspect of seasonal characters that I was looking forward to was a seasonal Dark Zone. No one is grinding perfect expertise 27 loadouts that would go away at the end of the season, so people would be fighting in the DZ and perhaps conflict with the quickest loadouts they could scrape together, effectively making the PvP combat much less of a nuisance to fight. So I wanted to include this one specifically because of the comment they make about the seasonal characters and the seasonal Dark Zone that was going to be coming to the game, because I agree, that is the one thing that I'm like sorely bummed out about that we never got. If anyone doesn't remember, the idea that they were going to have with seasonal characters for Seasons 2.0 was that the Dark Dark Zone was just going to be filled with seasonal characters, right? They would separate off that Dark Zone from the normal Dark Zone with your main characters. And so the idea was that every season you would then have people going into the Dark Zone who have nothing, right? And in a way that would kind of recreate that essence of that early level DZ and PvP gameplay that people have always said they love so much from the Division 1 and 2. And it's why part of me kind of hopes that in the future, as much as I love the Dark Zone from the Division 1 and 2, I have a bunch of amazing memories from there. I do think if you're looking at the Division 3 or just in the future in general, it might not be a bad idea to try and find a way to make the Dark Zone a bit more dynamic and have a bit more of a reset basis to it. That's not to say I don't want people to be able to take in their own loadouts and stuff in there, I do, but the always persistent nature of it that we know from the Division 1 and 2, it's kind of been played out. And I think there's a lot you could look into or potentially do where you have the Dark Zone be a thing that you enlist into and maybe you can only queue into once every hour. And then everybody is in there fighting for some of the best loot in the game, but it's a one life kind of thing. And maybe there's a bunch of dynamic contamination zones that rise up and subside and you have to kind of avoid those. Maybe there's weather stuff going on. I don't know. That's probably a whole entire video that it could be on its own. But yeah, I fully agree that out of everything that Seasonal Characters was bringing, I am probably most bummed out that we're not going to get that seasonal Dark Zone idea. Alright, next up, looking at Hypno over on Twitter, who said Heartland being cancelled was a mistake. The gameplay loop was excellent. Yeah, I've really got nothing to add to this. Just wanted to add it in because, yeah, I fully agree. Alright, next up we've got Rallyman320 from over on YouTube, who said, hot take, alongside the Division 3, they should remake the Division 1 with the graphical and mechanical upgrades from the Division 2 or 3, depending on its changes, and offer it in a package a la World of Warcraft plus Classic. It hedges the concern over how well a new edition will be received by including a known and beloved title with all of the quality of life of the newer games. But this comment I felt really well encapsulated the overall discussion that has gone on over the years, really, for the Division 1 Remaster movement, and I would say I have some interesting thoughts on this. Now let me start by saying this. Do I like the Division 1? Absolutely. I love it. As I've said many times before here on the channel, the Division 1 is my favorite game of all time. That said, am I part of the crowd that really wants to see a remaster of it, at least right now? I don't know if I am. That's not to say that I wouldn't buy it and enjoy it, right? If they were to come out with a Division 1 remaster tomorrow, sure thing I'd be in there. But not only do I think it's a little bit early, right? The Division 1 is still an amazing game that holds up extremely well, but I'm also not convinced how financially successful it would be. Now don't get me wrong, would it be successful within the existing Division community? Absolutely. Pop culture influence and just support and love around it. Because while yes, the Division did hold the record for the highest selling new IP of all time up until Elden Ring came out in 2022, I don't think you can really say that that amount of hype and success really carried through, we'll say in the first year of the game's launch. People thought it was going to be one game based off of those trailers. It was kind of that game, but didn't really hit the mark on a lot of other spots. And so I don't think you can really look back and pretend that the Division 1 was this like juggernaut of pop culture and player base sizes and all that. It absolutely had a healthy population and a lot of people really enjoyed it, but I really just don't think it's that kind of a game where if you announced a remaster, people would be like scrambling to try and get it. By the end of its life at 1.8, people were definitely much more on board with it. That brought a lot of people back to the game and it had a really solid gameplay loop. And so I definitely think that what Rallyman is suggesting here with a World of Warcraft Classic approach, where you go through some of the updates and relive some of those moments, maybe then you get to 1.8, maybe you even go beyond and start introducing new content for the game. Again, I think that would be very successful and popular within the existing Division crowd, but I don't know how many more people you're going to draw beyond that. Whereas something like the Division 3 that is pushing the narrative forward, that's taking us to an all-new location with next-generation graphical improvements and gameplay stuff, I think that has a higher chance to appeal to a much wider amount of people compared to a remaster project. But maybe that's just me. Alright, and then we get to Ryan Porter here from Twitter, who said the Division should have been treated like Destiny 2. Keep the great thing you've built, but just keep releasing story and location content. No need to start from scratch with each release. I mostly disagree with this. Now, I know there are certainly a lot of people out there who would love for them just to stick with the Division 2 and continue building upon it for years and years and years. And in a perfect world, maybe that would be great, but I think the problem is that is just not the reality of game development. You mentioned Destiny 2, and if you look at what is happening over in their community right now, a lot of people are leaving after playing for so many years because their story has gotten to a point of finality, and a lot of them are saying, I'll be back when or if there's a Destiny 3. And from a logistical standpoint, it is also quite hard to keep these games entertaining and engaging engaging year after year after year. On one side, you have the catch-up part of it. If these games have been going for 4, 5, 6, 7 years, then a lot of people who are either looking to come back to the game or people who want to get into it for the first time feel completely and totally overwhelmed, and a lot of those people will be driven away simply by that idea that they would have to go through a year's worth of content to catch up. Then you have the technical side of things. We certainly have seen the Division 2's issues there. Tech debt is a very real concept, feel free to search it up, and that is something that the Division 2 itself has been struggling with for some time now. Even though these games exist out in the ether and we can't physically look at their age, just like a plant or a tree or an old house, these things do wear down over time. The foundations will get less and less sturdy, and the more you build on top of it, the more you're going to have to focus on rebuilding some of those supports and put more and more of your effort to just keeping the thing afloat. So while all of that is to say, well, yes, I understand the notion of wanting to stick with one thing forever and ever, there are a lot of benefits to restarting every now and then, bringing those new players on board, getting a fresh start in terms of the technical side of things. Now, do I think it should be every 3 years like it was between the Division 1 and 2? No, I do not. But having a new game and a fresh restart every 6 or 7 years, I think that would be kind of ideal. But who knows? We know the Division 3 is on the way. We'll see what happens after that. Alright, and then last but certainly not least, we have the topic of survival. As I mentioned earlier, this was by far the thing that I got the most amount of comments about, and what I found most amusing was how polar opposite those comments were. Some people either said survival was the greatest thing to happen in their lives, whereas other people said, meh, it wasn't that good. So I kind of wanted to talk about the overall legacy of survival and compare some of those divides. I picked out a few comments here that kind of encapsulate those things. Devil Driver on YouTube said survival was and is the best DLC this franchise has ever done. I still play it and the servers usually have 5 to 8 players every time. Joe KKAG said bringing survival to Division 2 would make it feel like a whole new game. But on the other side, then you have Shen on Discord saying survival was a cool gimmick in Division 1, but it ultimately gave you nothing of value in return. Way more overrated than it should be in my opinion. And you had Von Diesel on Twitter, another friend of the channel, who said survival wasn't as good or popular as people pretend it was. Outside of release week and the free weekend, you rarely ever found full PvP servers. I enjoyed the mode a lot, played it a ton, but I think people way overstayed how fun it was or the potential that it had. So again, we could talk about survival all day long. I'll try and keep this a bit brief as I know this video is already getting quite long. Was survival fun, unique, and innovative for the time that it came out? I think absolutely yes. In many ways, it helped set the trend of battle and extraction royales that we saw take place over the following, almost decade. But I think some people look back at survival and say even to this day, there is not a thing you could do to make survival better, right? It was just absolutely perfect in every way, shape, or form. I don't really think that's true. One of the most common examples, and something that I fully believe, is that the fact that survival had static loot locations, right? Those caches, for whether it be the gear stuff or the material ones or clothing, the fact that those never move around, that eliminates a huge amount of tension that would be there if you didn't know where you were going to get your next supplies from on each and every run. Because what people do who have played it for years like myself is they just memorize a few routes, and depending on where they spawn, they take one of those routes, and that's it. So I think to pretend that they could bring survival back in this day and age exactly how it was, when we've had so many other, games and studios make innovations in that genre, it's not like survival from 2016 would come back and take the world by storm. No pun intended. However, I do think that it would be worthwhile to continue investing in survival in the future. Obviously, we saw them try to do that with the Division Heartland, and that did not pan out, which I know a lot of people try and say that that was not survival, but the devs themselves said that it was meant to be the spiritual successor. And here's my hot take for the video. Even though Heartland as a free-to-play idea did not pan out, I still do not think that that was a misguided idea to try and make a survival portion of the Division franchise a free-to-play experience. And what I still do think has the potential to be successful would be to make the Division 3, right, have that be its own premium experience just like the Division 1 and 2, but to then bring back the survival game mode as a part of the Division 3. However, similar to how Warzone is a free to download and play portion of, Call of Duty every year, make the survival part of the Division 3 a disconnectable and separate entity, and allow people to download that as a free-to-play client and be able to experience and play alongside people who do own the Division 3 and have their own progression there. I still really do believe that would be a fantastic way to onboard people to the idea of the Division franchise, right? If they play survival and they can feel that amount of tension that gets created from that amazing atmosphere and blend of everything that we all felt back in 2016, that might then inspire them to go and buy the Division 3, which they otherwise might not have. You can also have a sense of split progression where maybe people who only own the free version could unlock different cosmetics to use on their next run, but people who own the Division 3 and choose to go and play survival get those cosmetics and, different caches and materials and resources, whatever. I don't know, I still think there could be value in them exploring that idea, but I'm gonna guess not many of you will agree with me on that, and that is totally fine. Alright, well there you have it, my friends. Those are some of the Division community's hot takes, at least the ones that we had time to get to in this video. I very much hope you all enjoyed this rabbit hole dive into the world of controversy. Again, I want to emphasize what I said at the start. None of this is meant to spark argument within the community. Rather, it is to try and encourage constructive discussion. Disagreeing on these different topics is not right versus wrong. It is just opinion. Everybody's take on these things is valid. And that said, I would love to hear your thoughts on any of these topics that we went over down in the comments below. I'll be really curious to go through and see what you all are saying. So hopefully you all enjoyed this new series and idea. If you want to see more in the future, definitely let me know that as well. And I hope you will consider subscribing to see that and all of the Division stuff that I do. That's going to do it for me on this one though, folks. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. RogueGold. Out.